on the cloud. And right.
Questions.
Right. Good evening and welcome everyone to this, our third Q&A session. And we've got questions from the UK, South Africa, Hong Kong and Australia this evening. And of course, we've got all the lovely people in from Portugal and the UK and people from London. I think that's our yes. So we've got quite a few people from across the world asking us questions tonight. And I think we'll start with Ryan from Hong Kong. He has sent in a question. What is the best way to approach an agent?
It depends what country what you're in, and but there are a few. There's no hard and fast rules, but there are a few recommendations here. First, try to find agents that really deal with the kind of stuff you wrote, because most of the time, people just send something to an agent, it's quite irritating because many years ago I used to agent for a little while, and I remember used to get lots of things which I had no interest in. So as an agent, you have to get something that you can deal with. So that's the first thing. Second, you have to remember that agents, they get very little money because they just get a share of the little bit of money that an author gets when he or she publishes his or her book. So it means that you have to really approach with friendliness. And second, try to offer something back to how little money an agent makes. Try to offer something which is really of value, because the thing is, like, if an agent comes across a manuscript, it could be a very nice one, but so that's the only one. So the author has no platform, has nothing else to offer apart from a manuscript. It has to be really damn good, and the agent should really trust that person, because otherwise there's no way that the agent is just going to take the time and the effort and the resources to try and invest that kind of thing. Another thing is, if you go to events or if you network, you may come across agents who actually recommend a first-time writer to write something which is in demand. So that's a very nice way of being agented for the first time. So some of these rules, they apply to anywhere in the world. And but there are things that you should never do, which is agents that say, well, if you pay me $5,000, I can get your book published. Stay away from that kind of scam. An agent, and I say it again here, gets a percentage, which is really very little, but gets a percentage, a little chunk of what you author gets. And that's the way it is in the industry. So the agent becomes your partner. So depending on how famous you are, what you wrote, your relationship with your agents. There are agents that they're very good at editing, reading a manuscript and say, well, we'll have to change here and there, so that is going to be more marketable. But in general, that's that. My books go through an agent, but I've had a relationship with her, a partnership for publication for years now, and what she does is she tells me what the demands are, and she proposes some projects, and that's what I do, and if if you're there in Hong Kong, you're thinking, well, how did you approach your agent, it was an event. So I was just there chatting. She said she was an agent. I said, well, I've just written in those days my first book, and she said, right, how many copies has the book sold? So I told her the book had sold very well, and of course she showed an interest. However, if I just said, well, I just have a manuscript. Because most of the time, as I said, as the share is so small, there, if you say, well, yes, I've got my first book and it sold that amount, so that really draws the interest. It's just like now, my agent, just chatting, we just saw the other day, after years in the market, she managed now to get a woman who sold over 5 million books. Then you may say, wow, now she's going to be a rich agent. Not really, because first, she sold 5 million, but through some of these companies like Avon or whatever. So people buy a couple of lipsticks and nail varnish and they get a book. So it's a highly discounted price anyway, but it's quite a lot of books, so she's going to pay her bills now for 6 months. Yeah. So you have to think in along those lines. Rachel managed to land a agent with her first manuscript. Is that true?
Actually, it was a proposal. I think that
That's right, yes.
I didn't even I got a book deal without having written it. It was if you're doing fiction, you will have to have finished your novel before.
That's a project to do. That's right.
But mine was a travel, and it was my second proposal. I got an agent because of social media. I realised I needed an agent, and I actually asked people on Facebook, and they recommended somebody who I went to see, and I thought she was very straightforward, and she was more of a TV agent than a book agent, but somebody in her company was a book agent. And I did a proposal to do a Spanish cookbook, and he tried to sell it. Nobody wanted it. And I remember he sent me a message with the latest rejection, and I phoned him and I sent an email back to him saying, what about a book about whiskey and cooking? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, a book about whiskey and food. And he phoned me and he said, this is the holy grail of publishing. This is books that women will buy as presents for men. This is the book that we're looking for. We need something every year for Christmas that women will buy for men. And this sounds like it. And that is how I got an agent. I mean, I think the thing is there's different ways to approach agents. First of all, I think if your book is exceptional, you will get an agent. At the same time, you might get a lot of rejections. And it is what James says, you have to find somebody who is suitable for you. If you see an agent who specialises in science fiction and you're writing romance, that's a waste of time. If you see an agent who has exactly the same person as you and you're in direct competition with this person because you write such similar books, that is a bad idea because they already have their loyalty to that person. You really need to do your research about what kind of agent you want. Part of the thing with an agent is it is like being married, and you do have to see if this is the person that you would get on with. Agents can be very different. My agent gets me deals. He doesn't really talk to me outside of me sending him a proposal and him trying to sell it. I know other people who talk to their agents just about every week. That depends on what kind of relationship you want with your agent. I know sometimes having a really prestigious agent isn't as good as it seems, because you could be 100 on their list of clients and you're number 100, so they never get around to you. Whereas if you have a less prestigious agent, you could be number 5 on their list, so they always get around to trying to sell you. I think the thing to remember is that an agent isn't there to pander to your ego or to be your mum. They are there to make money for you and to make money for them. They will only ever take you on if they think they can get money from you. This does not make them mercenary or doesn't make them evil. It's they have bills to pay and they know that you have bills to pay. The other thing I'd say about choosing and looking for an agent is you really have to know by now exactly what your book is about. So, I mean, I got a deal on the basis of, to be honest, about 2 pages, but that is really unusual. The next book that my agent couldn't sell, so nobody bought it. I spent 9 months doing a synopsis, doing an introduction, and doing a sample chapter, and it was a similar book to the one that I wrote, but it was about Ireland and about drink in Ireland, and nobody thought it would sell because they didn't think that the Irish drink market was big enough, so no one wanted it. And for that one, I had to do a synopsis of every chapter, and I had to do an introductory chapter. So I actually had to go to Ireland and write all about exactly what happened there. And I had to do a really strong introduction. You need that for any book. If you're going to approach an agent, you don't necessarily need to send them that, but that needs to be ready. Before you even look at agents, you need to have a synopsis, you need to have a chapter summary, and you need to have a sample chapter that is the very best that you think that you can make it. And then you look for an agent that you think would be suitable for you. They do the kind of thing that they write, their clients have the same kind of interests that your clients have, that you have, but you don't have somebody that you're in direct competition with. So if you are doing a book about cognitive behavioural self-help, don't go with someone that has one person that already does cognitive behavioural self-help, but go with someone that does maybe got more self-help in general clients. You really need to know your stuff. And you need to remember also with them is you really need to remember you have got this synopsis and this chapter summary that is precious to you. They see 10 and 20 of them every day. And that is a really important thing to remember.
So just adding to what Rachel said, to wrap it all up, Rachel said, well, the manuscript has got to be exceptional. That's true, and it has to be exceptional. So if your manuscript is rubbish, it's not exceptional. So there are standards for a manuscript to be exceptional, because the thing is, most authors, they fantasize about the exceptional manuscript, and then you just read the first line and you say, what? So it's got to be exceptional. I like that word. And the other thing is just to stress what or to underline what Rachel said, is the fact that yes, your agent is not your nanny. If there is like any signs that you realize that yes, that agent might take you up, don't make hell out of his life. Because the thing is, there's nothing worse, really nothing worse than an anxious writer. That one that phones the agent, sends emails, and wants to know what's going on. Nothing's going on, darling. You wrote this piece of garbage they want me to sell. I'm making an effort. I'm making as much as I can to get it put in the market. So you have to understand that the agent's there, as I said, for very little money to try and do a very, very difficult job. Okay.
Excellent, thank you. There were some really good tips there in terms of getting prepared, working with an agent, managing your expectations. And I liked your point, James, about don't give anyone any money if they're asking for it, because there are pitfalls, isn't it? And on that note, I was just going to ask if, besides that one, are there any other pitfalls about working with agents?
Well, the thing is, like, whatever you're supposed to earn, you'll have to share. So, but I don't consider that a pitfall, because an agent can get better deals, and the moment we start developing any sort of relationship with the agent, it's pretty nice actually. Someone who manages your day-to-day stuff, so it's no problem. So I don't actually see any pitfalls for the author, and I tend to see pitfalls for the agent. So
Yes, it's a very tough market out there, isn't it? And I
Yeah.
think also with COVID now, everybody's been in lockdown, so people have been busy writing. I mean, there was an article on the news today about Costa did a book thing, and they were just overwhelmed with the number of books that came into them. And I
Yeah.
think people now know that the route to fame or some kind of platform to launch your services, write a book. And that is becoming quite a trend now. So you are having to compete with a lot
I
of
know. Yes, actually,
noise.
this afternoon I was recording a talk for one of my courses, and I was just saying, I said, well, look, because of the pandemic, all the rubbish that you had in your drawers now are coming out, and you think they're exceptional. So they're not. So that rubbish in your drawer, just leave it there. Just leave it. And so try to, if you want to write, you have to compete, and you have to write something that people want to read. Just because you say, oh, I have nothing to do, what am I going to do? I'm going to write a book. No, go and clean your house, do your nails. So many things that you can do, rather than writing a book. So the thing is very important. Because people say, well, is that what you actually this afternoon someone was just saying to me, James, the way you put it is just, I have to write professionally. Yes, darling, you have to write professionally. If I go to the dentist and it says, oh, I'm going to pull your tooth out, but I'm not a professional, I'm just going to run out of the door. Yes, if you're going to write, yes, you have to write professionally. So something like slapdash. It's not. But depending.
I think there's a thing that people misunderstand writing as a process and writing as a product. What you're essentially sending to an agent is an orchestral composition that has been written, has been tested, has been rehearsed. Absolutely. The first violinist knows what the flutist is doing. The composer spent 3 years trying to compose this so that the flutist and the violin were in perfect harmony. The orchestra director is standing there to make sure everything works. The theatre's already been built and the tickets have been sold. None of that happened in a day. You see a 45-minute orchestral performance of a symphony that will have taken a decade to produce perfectly. And I think that's the thing people have to remember, that what we're talking about, what you send to an agent, is the finished product. It's the orchestral event. It's the symphony that's done.
But what I was mentioning actually before, Rachel, is and everyone, is the fact that you have to prepare yourself.
Yes.
That's the thing, because the thing is like, and I know that people wake up in the morning, what am I going to do today? Have a cup of coffee and write a book? No, you have to have your cup of coffee and you will start preparing yourself to be able to write the book. So that kind of thing came out of my heart, and my mother loved it. Yeah.
That's nice.
I understand that. Yeah, nice mummy you have, darling.
No, I mean, I think that's the thing people need to remember. I mean, I've written 2,000 words today, and I know that probably, I don't think one of them will ever make it to the final, actually today, none of them will actually make it to the final product, but it's 2,000 words of rehearsal, it's 2,000 words of process. And if I don't do them, I can't have a final product.
Yeah. And also just to get it out of your system, put it on a page, have it reflect back at you and say, yes, no, it works, it doesn't work. And then you can put it aside and make fresh thoughts, isn't it? Anyway, we've had a lot of discussion.
Right, the next question.
I'm going on to that. We've got Joshua from Australia who has asked, how can we use podcasts in conjunction with our storytelling?
Well, podcasts are a way of making yourself visible, so it's just stick your head out and say hi to people from the parapet. So that's it's a way of communicating. It doesn't have to be only podcasts, it could be on Instagram. You can have those tiny little pictures there and you say something. There again, everything depends on what you're writing about and who your target audience is. So before doing anything, because for example, let's suppose that I'm going to write a spiritual book, and I hope that nuns are going to buy my book. Then I may ask a question. Well, how about advertise my book in a porno magazine? It's very unlikely that the nuns are going to read it. It's not going to work. So we have to think, like, what we're going to write, who our target audience is. And sometimes they may say, well, like young people, yes, a lot of, I can see that because of my grandson. He spends hours on TikTok. Yeah. If you want to talk to young kids, do your dance in there, So that's fine, do something. So that's going to go viral. If you get like 5,000 people having a look at your dance, as you're jumping and changing clothes, whatever they do there, and suddenly you sell something like a book, they buy it. So podcasts are very nice, and lots of other things are very nice as well. But podcasts just like one tick in a huge list of things that can be done. And but what I usually say when people come to me with like, oh, can I do this and that? And I say, well, just do something you're comfortable with. Because the thing is, some people say, oh, everybody's going online and doing these live things now. Right, yes, they do a live thing. Darling, it's not a live, that's a death. So no, if we're going to do a live, you have to be lively. If you're going to record a podcast, it's got to sound like a podcast. Rachel is very good at doing that. She does that with all the celebrities, and everybody talks, and there is something interesting, etc. Because if it's like a podcast and you listen, I don't know, for something like half an hour, and you don't get anything out of it, so you're not going to, that's really shooting your foot. So, so you do have to do something which is interesting, whatever it is, and try to sell yourself as you are, or as you want to be, or you want to train yourself to be. Rachel, you're the podcast queen.
Well, I think what it does for you, if you're writing non-fiction and you're wanting to be an expert in a topic, I think it sets you above everybody else. I think you also need to consider that you want the book to have the same title as the podcast, so be careful of the title of the podcast. The person who's been very successful at this is Elizabeth Day, and Elizabeth Day has a podcast called How to Fail, and she interviews people on the failures they've had in life, and sometimes they don't have happy endings. Somebody said, this just didn't work. I tried this, it didn't work, it was a disaster, and there was no happy ending, there was no lesson to be learned. And she has done incredibly well and is now presenting TV programs, and she got a book on how to fail. I think if you're going to do a self-help book, I think those kind of things are it's very important to have something that sets you above everybody else, and a podcast is a good thing to have. The thing is, it's kind of like what James was saying about TikTok. If you're going to do it, you need to do it properly. You need to have good sound, you need to have a good microphone, you need to make sure that you don't sound like you are in a gigantic hall talking on the other side from the microphone. You often will need to have a very small room or blankets in the room so that they're absorbing the sound. If you're going to interview people, you need to ask them questions and listen very closely to the answers. I have heard podcasts where I've realised people actually don't have interview skills because they're too busy talking. And also you need to have tenacity. You can't just do 5 podcasts and expect it all to work. You have to keep going, and you have to do them for quite a long time. Now, there are ways, you can invest in podcasts and that you can pay producers to do things. You can also look at if it's possible to get commercial arrangements with people to do podcasts. I think, if you're wanting to write a romance novel, what you want to do then is maybe create an atmosphere for yourself about where you talk to romantic novelists. Then you have to look who are the demographic that listen to podcasts and read romantic novels. What products do they buy? And then try and get some sponsorship for their products. It's quite easy to get 1,000 listeners for a podcast. It's harder to get above that, at least in English. And places like Acast for advertising aren't really interested in you, as in terms of you making money from a podcast, until you've got about 10,000 listeners. It's a crowded market. You'd have to be very careful about what you did and how you did it. I mean, we're now getting a lot more. We did this Double Scotch podcast with no PR and no advertising and no marketing. And now I can see we haven't done one for about 3 weeks, and I can see it people beginning to want to know more about it. And we'll probably get a sponsor now, but we did it very much as setting out a calling card. I think what a podcast does is it gives you a calling card, and it gives you a calling card for events, especially if they're virtual events nowadays. So if you are sitting in Brazil, in the north of Brazil, and there is a literary festival in the south of Brazil, you can do an event at that literary festival with your podcast. So you have to look at it like a brand that you can then work to get yourself known. Because part of the issue with having a book, there are some people who can still sit in corners and hide and write books. Susanna Clarke, who wrote Dr. Norrell, Mr. Norrell and Mr. Strange, and she recently wrote Piranesi. She hides in a corner, but she's an exceptional writer, and everybody runs around her with all the publicity. Almost everybody else is on their own, and at least a podcast gives you a brand that you can then get into all the events that you want to be in. If as a writer what you want to be is at all these literary festivals, before you even have a book deal, it would be really helpful if they knew you. They could know you if you had a podcast that you wanted to then do at the literary festival, especially seeing as everything is going to be online for at least the next 6 months.
So that goes to say that when I mentioned networking,
Mm-hmm.
want to land an agent, so some of these literary festivals, they're fantastic for that anyway, and but whatever you do, being it a podcast or whatever, remember that you have to have something to say. The message is very important. Rachel mentioned something which is very important: the sound quality, the production of your podcast, etc. But the message, if you're going to say something, please say something which is relevant.
Yeah, there are a lot of podcasts which I quite often look on podcasts on a certain topic. So then I'll pick up quite obscure podcasts and show notes, and it's an hour and a half of two guys in Texas who think they're hilarious and no one else does. And I was thinking, darlings, you could edit this, and there's actually probably about 10 minutes that are genuinely worth my time. You could have talked for an hour and a half and edited this, and it would have been an okay listen. That is one thing I think you do also have to really do as well, is edit your podcasts. If you don't edit them, people won't pay attention. They get too long.
Remember that live is a live, a podcast is a podcast, so
Yeah.
ours is not being edited.
Yeah, and I mean,
in full.
I was just thinking there's a lovely way to connect the stuff we spoke about with agents. Rachel, you mentioned a synopsis and the 3 things, and it might be worth, for us to be exploring with writers and future writers to make a space on your story where people can present that and help them make an advertising podcast of the 3 elements. So that is something we're thinking of, and it will be coming up. So
And
watch the space.
Just linking both things now. There again, if you have anything out like a podcast, like an Instagram campaign, etc., and you happen to be in contact with an agent, the agent is going to listen to your podcast, is going to see what you have published on social media just before going back to you. So remember that anytime you show anything online, that's forever, that's there. And to say something like, my first broadcast or my first podcast wasn't good quality, but now I improved. It's kind of complicated because you cannot say, oh, we're going to listen to my podcast. Could you listen from the 20th podcast onwards? Because until the 21st, everything was rubbish. It's online. It's online. You can take that offline, but sometimes people find that even, and not only podcasts. And I shouldn't have said podcasts, but like anything you publish, anything you say, and especially anything that people say about you. So there forever. In Europe, we have the right to forget. We are very lucky. But for example, in Brazil, in America, in Australia, in New Zealand, South Africa, they do not have the right to forget. So if I say anything bad about Carolina online, it's going to be there forever. It's her new brand, rubbish.
Can you just explain to people what the right to forget is? Because as you say, it's mostly in Europe.
So actually, if someone says something which you think is not really becoming of you, it's not very positive, or if you've got a reason for that, you can go online and you can fill in a form, and you ask for the search engines to actually delete whatever was said about you. But you have to prove that it was really something which is not true, or it's really harming your career, you change your life, that kind of thing. So it means that you have to be very, very careful whatever you publish, and because the thing is, I know that you can upload a podcast, and then if you think it was rubbish, you can download or you can sort of delete it. However, they've got some of these sites that you delete from a site, but someone else had republished that somewhere. But even if they hadn't, I may delete the podcast, but what Desiree thought about the podcast is up for her to delete, you see? So it gets even worse, because whatever you published is not there anymore, but the opinions about what you publish, they're floating around, which is pretty embarrassing.
Yes, and I suppose the search engines as they are, as soon as you type someone's name in, everything pops up related to them. So, I mean, good advice there from Rachel and yourself, edit what you're going to put up, be brutal, be clear. And as you say, James, it's permanently there, plus the reviews. So that's really good advice for everyone. But watch the Your Story space. We'll be giving some opportunity for people to do stuff and present their work. So that'll be coming up soon. Shall we go on to the next question? What is the best way? This is from Babawa Chikwa from South Africa. What is the best way to introduce storytelling to learners?
But that's something. It's like storytelling education.
Yes,
it's the real trend just now. I believe that you must be a teacher, because if you ask that kind of question, any teacher anywhere in the world, before you walk into the classroom, you have to have a very good plan, a class plan. So storytelling can be part of your plan. The head of your plan, like my students, after 45 minutes should be able to, so you can have the action or that piece of learning that the students should be able to demonstrate after a certain amount of time based on story. So you may say, the students should be able to understand when Christopher Columbus arrived in America and the consequences of his arrival. And I have like 45 minutes to do it. Rather than giving your class just saying, well, today we're going to talk about the discovery of America, and then you start just spewing out facts. What you can do is say, well, look, today I've got a story to tell. There was someone in Italy, and etc. So then you tell that as a story. So it's like a classroom technique like any other. What's really fascinating is that nowadays, because of technology, even some subject matters like mathematics, chemistry, physics, there's quite a lot of stories that you can tell, you know. So the other day I was watching online this maths teacher just telling stories about numbers in mathematics. I've got like the pi and I don't know what. And he started saying, well, he said, well, I would have 12 stories to tell you, but I'm just going to summarize this story in one, because you know that there are numbers which are really mysterious, numbers that we know they're there, we have to count, but we don't understand very much what they are. And I said, what? Yeah. Immediately I was interested in maths and physics. Yeah. And so he starts with pi, but then after, the one which I thought was really interesting was the G number, which is the number for gravity. Yeah. So he was just, he was teaching or talking about how a body is attracted to another one. So you have to divide whatever, subtract whatever. But when all the calculations are done, you have to divide by G, which is a mysterious number. Yeah. So he told he was telling these stories, you know, how once someone found it out and how it was applied, and people were against it. People thought it was something from the devil, and that was wonderful. So I managed to keep that kind of information because the whole class was based in story, and I decided to mention this kind of patchy story because I was teaching maths and physics, and my knowledge of maths and physics are like nothing. Yeah. And I learned something. So now whenever I see, like, I don't know, my pen falling on my desk, I say, oh, I can get like the mass of my pen, the mass of my desk, and divide it. Yeah. The other thing as well, the other day, also I was watching one of these teachers. I think I was teaching physics and using stories as well. And I learned a lot, like in 5 minutes. And so he was telling a story, which we think, well, in space, everything is weightless. And so, okay, yeah, I know that. And he said, well, that's what you think, but I'm going to tell you a story. If you were in the space station and you got like a bowling heavy ball, and then you threw that at a person, that could smash someone's chest. And I thought, well, that's like, that's weightless. And he said, and he was just telling the story that no, the mass is the same. The object is weightless. So it means that when you're in a space station, you have to be very careful if the mass of the objects, if the object on Earth weighed like 5 kilos, it's going to be floating around like a soap bubble, but the weight's 5 kilos. So if you throw that towards, it's going to smash your face or break the space station. And so he was telling stories about how the astronauts have got to be very careful, even with like pointed objects, and because the mass is still there. The weight's not there. And they carry on talking that we think, well, there's no gravity in a space station. It says, oh, it was telling stories of to let us know it's not true. So the space station is always falling towards Earth, and that kind of so on and so forth. Anyway, so as you can see, I was exposed to those stories just once when I was doing something else. That's what I do. I'm doing something else. I'm listening to things, and it stuck in my mind. As you can see, you can use stories for absolutely everything. It should be just incorporated into your class plan, and you're going to be a huge success.
I think the only thing I would add to that, genuinely would be, rather than even just telling stories, is get the children involved in terms of, if almost as if they've got to act out the different stories, because then they'll really remember. You know, you were saying if you're looking at Christopher Columbus, rather than giving them a load of facts, just get them to be the different people in the story. And again, if you're talking about maths and physics, if you're, again, it's the same thing with children. If you get them to be the gravity, get them to be the ball, get them to be in space, even if they're all pretending. I mean, teenagers can be hard because they hate you and they hate everything. But if they're young enough and are enthusiastic enough, I think getting them to act it out, something for which you don't need a lot of resources apart from the children and some space. I think doing that online would be, if your school has had to close down because of COVID and your teaching's online, that would be more complicated, but it would still be possible that you make the children part of the story. Would be the only way that I think you could add to what James has just said.
And I mean, as you know, I work in business a lot. One of the key things at the moment is telling your growth story, you know, in numbers. So how many customers you're intending to have, what profit you're intending to do, what the costs are going to be, or your target audience. And it's told in a story, and there are templates for that. And I'm sure, you know, for schools, etc., there's templates as to how to engage children and give them little hooks as to how to tell their stories. So yeah, so it seems to be storytelling is everywhere, as we know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we're now at 15 minutes to go, and I thought we'll open it to the floor. Does anybody want to ask a question? If not, I've got other questions. Right, we'll just crack on then.
Yes, crack on.
So we've got Loretta Reed from South Africa. How would I go about creating a digital story for struggling learners? Probably another teacher.
Well, digital is just, the thing is, we think of digital as something magical. It's actually magical, but it doesn't have to be digital. You know, whatever you used to do not digitally, you can do digitally. For example, Rachel suggested that if you're teaching kids about like Discovery of America, you can do something digitally. You know, you can have like a play performed on Zoom. You know, so Fernanda can be Christopher Columbus, and Betty can be the captain of a ship and that kind of thing, and we can perform it here. So that would be digital. Yeah. So I say this because the digital world reflects the material world, you know, so it's just much easier. Yeah. There are lots of programs online that actually can animate cartoons for you. You sometimes have to do some recording, some sharing. It very much depends nowadays on what your resources are, because if you can spend more, you can do wonderful things digitally. For example, you can have like a story on, there's an Apple app in which you can publish in a way. You can upload, you can publish a story, and you can have little animations and voiceovers, and so there's so many things that can be done. There again, you know, whatever you do, you have to think of your class plan. That's the crux of the matter here, because the things, if you don't know what you're doing that for, if you just say, well, I'm just going to add the stories to my teaching for the sake of adding stories to my teaching, you're not going to go that far. Yeah. So stories, they illustrate, they enhance whatever you are doing, being them digital or not digital. But as I said, in the digital world, you've got all these things that can be done. And Beverly is going to remember that a year ago or so, 2 years ago or so, I went to Hong Kong for that Department for International Trade event, and there's lots of things for teachers. So in the classroom in those days, or in those months, a few months ago anyway, so they used to have things like VR goggles and augmented reality goggles, etc. So that's a fantastic teaching tool. But there again, if it's not incorporated into a proper class plan, it's not going to work. It's just something fancy, because I realized when I was there were people from all over the world, and there was this lady from Singapore, and we were just watching something which was wonderful. To put the goggles on, it wasn't virtual reality, it was augmented reality. So it's transparent, so you see this world, but then you see things in this world which would not be in this world. And as we put the goggles on, we could interact with this being, like a kind of robot kind of thing, on a table. Of course, all virtual. Wonderful. I had great fun. When we finished, I was so enthusiastic, and she said, well, did you like it? I said, yes, it's a fantastic way of telling a story. And she says, yeah, I know, but you work with stories. And I'm a teacher, and I just wonder, what would I do with that in a classroom? Yeah. And she's quite right. I don't know if a rich school in Singapore bought that kind of stuff or not, but if the teacher doesn't know what to do with the equipment, or with the app, with the program, whatever, with the digital feature of the digital thing they're going to work with, so there's no point. But if you are able to incorporate something digitally, think of your budget, go online, and try to find out lots of sites that can do lots of things. There are many things you can actually do for free.
I mean, I suppose that again, it's the thing of everything is digital right now, and it is, as you say. I mean, we're organising some courses next year on Thursday evenings, which are the best night out you can have while you're in your house. Because again, because of COVID, none of us are going anywhere, and everything has to be digital. I think what's happened with, I think the most successful teachers in the past 9 months are ones who have managed to pivot to digital properly and aren't necessarily trying to do exactly the same online experience that there is in a classroom, but are trying to teach the same things, which I think is quite a different way of thinking. You have to think that essentially digital does what real life does, but it does it differently. So trying to make digital like a bad version of real life doesn't really work. Trying to take what is really good about digital that makes it better than real life is a much better approach. And again, that's just a totally different way of thinking. And it is, as James was saying, if it's just there for the sake of it, it doesn't do anything. It's like having a podcast for the sake of it. What is it that you want this podcast to do? What is it that you want this digital learning to do? And if you're not clear about that, then don't get involved in it until you can answer those questions very clearly.
Ministries of education all over the world now, they make it public, like sites for teachers on how to teach online, and how to add the digital stuff to their teaching, etc. It is all for free, So there again, the other day I was just watching something from Australia, something from Brazil, sort of something from America. There's quite a lot of stuff going on in America. It's all free, So you can just get the ideas from there, and they're copyright free, and it's just apply to your own reality.
So I suppose the thing with COVID is kind of increasing the need for online digital platforms as part of the training to make it more interesting and exciting. And if you remember when I did my NLP presentation, it's all about the engagement of 38% is nonverbal, tone, etc. And 55% is body language. So we're missing out on all of that when we're doing the Zooms. So to change the impact of the learning through a digital format, and just the pace, the dynamic, the stimulating different parts of the brain, etc., it's becoming more and more vital.
Because it is our way of, as you know, I deal at times with cinema. And one thing that whenever directors come up to me, and they're sort of, because some directors, and actors as well, they love the so-called close-up, because that gives me an opportunity for you to see my tear coming down my face. So sometimes look, it's not really telling any story. We need an open plan. Show everything around you. But the things like with Zoom and teaching online and telling stories online, we have become talking heads, and of course you can put on with that for a while, but not for a long time. So if you're a storyteller or a teacher, what I suggest is just like train yourself to talk online. So just make it lively, like a lively version of yourself. It's of course, so it cannot be a lively version of someone else, but be yourself, be lively, talk to people, like move, don't be afraid, don't be like a talking head. Now Beverly is going to ask me a question and I am going to give an answer. Beverly, you can ask me the next question.
Sorry, I thought you were just making that as part of the illustration. However, I've just
yes, I was.
You were, so I thought, I'm waiting for you to continue. Anyway, I've just had a question from Ian, who's in our audience, and he's based down in London. And he says, talking about agents, every website makes all agents sound great. So how do you choose?
Well, it depends on you have to go to the agent and see, what the agent is offering. However, one thing I can tell you, those agents that sound too good to be true, stay away from them. That's the thing. Yeah. Actually, the greatest agents in the world, they sometimes they do have a site nowadays, like they say, submit your manuscript here, name, address, who you are, what you have to offer, manuscript, just the first 2,000 words, not one word more, everything, and that's it. But if it comes there like, oh, talk to, I'm open, and then some say something like, I'm open to talking to anybody, darling. If you have time to talk to everybody, when you have time to sell the books that you have to sell to a certain number of publishers. So if it's too good to be true, it's not true. Yeah. But there's one thing which I think that solves the problem, is recommendation. It's just because you can. I use Google for everything. So if I was to look for an agent, and I've got a Rachel McCormack agent, and she's got this website, I talk to anybody, you can send me anything. I always consider everything. So I have like Rachel McCormack's agented writers, and then I come across Carolina Villanova, and usually authors are on Facebook, that kind of thing. Then I say, hello, Carolina, I'm James from the UK. And I realized that Rachel McCormack is your agent. What have got to tell me about her? If I find 2 or 3 people, she's going to say, well, apart from her charging £2,000 to be my agent, and now I've got a book self-published because she's got like a deal with a self-publishing company. She hasn't got anything else for me. Yeah. So I don't consider that. What's nice nowadays is everything is digital, but everything is public, everything is open. You go online and you find absolutely everything. I always crisscross all of the sites, and I ask people, I get information, and the other day I was just thinking, I'm living in the era of dossiers. If there's anybody, anybody that asks for a project, I just go online, find everything about that person, and then I contact the person. So you can do that with agents. You can do that with publishers.
I think social media is actually a really good way if you're saying, and again, it's about looking for a fit for you. It's not necessarily looking for the best agent in the world. It's the one who's the best for you.
Absolutely.
A lot, especially in the UK, a lot of agents are on Twitter, and it's good to see who they talk to and what they talk about. And again, you're not looking to see if they're good. You're looking to see if they're if they would be interested in you, if they would want to sell you, because all agents are good in that they are good at what they do. Otherwise, they can't make it as agents, and they sell who they sell. But they might not be right for you. They might not sell you well. You might decide that you need to change an agent. And I think that's a really big thing. It's a bit, you're also looking for a good fit rather than you're looking for a good agent for you, which is quite a different prospect from a good agent. I generally, if you're in the UK, I would definitely say Twitter is a really good place to look up agents, just to see who they chat to, what they chat about. Because you might look up one and go, oh no, this person is so nothing like me. They would never sell me. This would be a real big mistake for me to go with them. And so I think that you need to do things like that.
And the thing is, another thing I was just that we can do very easily is if we think an agent is good enough, we go and talk to the agent and say, well, what's your portfolio? What publishers do you work with? How many books have you managed to place for the past 6 months? So there are lots of questions you can ask anyway. You may say, oh, but what if the agent gets offended? It's not an agent for you. Because the thing is, if someone comes up to and say, Beverly, you're a business consultant. How many companies have you worked with for the past 2 years? She's going to say, well, I've worked with 20, but I can only tell publicly 5. And I said, okay, so one of them that you can tell publicly, tell me something about that one, what job you've done, how satisfied are they, etc. That's fine. So nobody's offended with that, because if you confront an agent and the agent reacts and says, why are you asking me that? Why do you have to know? Yeah, I have to know because I'm kind of, we're going to become business partners here.
I mean, I think that's the thing is a agent is always it's a two-way relationship. And as James was saying, I have a friend she's not my agent, but she's a friend of mine. And, she refuses sometimes people who would be she would be very good at being their agent and they would be good for her, but she's got too many people like that. So I just think, I think they all look good, but you have to really, again, it's doing your research and knowing that you need to find the right fit. It's more, that's what it's always about.
Mm-hmm. Beverly?
I think we're out of time. We got what it was really interesting. It's funny how the questions all work together, with an agent and then the teaching and using technology and using podcasting. It's worked really well this evening. That's really great. Thank you very much. So our next time we are together, we will be having a golden hour with a life coach, Andrea Morrison, and she's all about helping to keep you unstuck and to prevent procrastination. So
exactly what I need.
Well, and it's also about, there's this thing called writer's block. So it's also about just freeing your mind, freeing your heart, working with procrastination, all the things that make you stuck to progress your work. So it will be quite an experiential little workshop. So come prepared to be engaged, and she'll ask you to do a few things. So that event is happening on the 16th of December. That's our next event. Next week we're publishing our newsletter, and so yeah, so brace yourselves for that. And we also have our next live Zoom writing event in it's the 12th of December. The 12th of December. So there's quite a lot coming up. I can't believe we're in Christmas month, and maybe we'll have a Christmas special as well towards closer to Christmas. Yeah, so that's where we are at the moment. We had a fabulous session with Natalie Haynes last time. It was really vibrant and people loved it. We got some fabulous feedback. So we'll see you at the next session with Andrea Morrison, life coach, and to help make you unstuck. So I hope everyone enjoyed this evening. Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.